Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you like this episode, please remember to hit the like button and leave a comment or two, then subscribe and click on the bell to receive notifications of whenever we release new videos. Also, please remember to share them to your social media. As the light of day faded, the experienced moose hunter carefully placed his steps through the brush, separating him from the rustling in the bushes near the creek. Then he noticed an eerie silence settled over the woods. No breeze, no birds or squirrels, just the sound of tension ringing like an alarm in his ears. About 40 yards ahead of him, he noticed an explosive parting of the brush. Whatever it was, there was two of them, and they were coming straight toward him, and fast. Realizing the movements were caused by grizzly bears, the hunter fired his rifle from his hip and struck a tree. Knowing he wouldn't have time to work the bolt-action hunting rifle, he knew he had to prepare for impact and pain. He twisted toward the ground, covering his head and face. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us deep into the rugged heart of the Kenai Peninsula in southern Alaska. Specifically, we're traveling to a wilderness area situated 50 miles south of Soldotna and roughly 200 miles south of the city of Anchorage. This region is a masterpiece of subarctic geography, defined by vast spongy tundra bogs, dense stands of spruce, and thick, nearly impenetrable brush that can swallow a person whole. The climate in this part of Alaska during the late days of September is biting and unpredictable, marking the harsh transition from the fleeting summer into a long, frozen winter. During this time, the sun hangs low in the sky, casting spruce shadows that grow depressingly long as the twilight descends quickly over the landscape. The flora of this wilderness is as diverse as it is dense, and understanding it is key to visualizing how a predator can remain hidden until it is mere feet away. In this specific area, the forest canopy is dominated by the resilient white spruce, the black spruce, and the quaking aspen. Beneath these giants, the ground is choked with Sitka alder and formidable devil's club, while various species of willow grow high and thick, creating a natural barrier that masks both sight and sound. For those foraging for food, the area is rich with berry bushes, including low bush cranberries, crowberries, and vibrant salmon berries. These plants provide a vital food source for the common animals in the area, such as massive Alaska Yukon moose, gray wolves, and the powerful brown bear. On September 20th, 1985, 33-year-old Rollin Braden was participating in a moose hunt with a group of men he held dear, his father Wes, his brother Wayne, and his hunting partner Darrel Rosin. Rollin was a family man through and through, and as he walked through the wilderness, his thoughts often drifted to his children, Max and Melinda. He was a man of faith who attended a small church in Soldotna, and he was known as an experienced hunter and a crack shot with a rifle. Despite his skill, Rollin felt a sense of anxiety as the moose season drew to a close. His father and brother had already secured their kills, but he and Darrel remained empty-handed until the very end. On this trip, Rollin was armed with a .358 caliber Ruger 77 rifle, a powerful firearm intended for the largest game Alaska has to offer. It is noted that he did not carry bear spray, nor was he accompanied by a dog during his final solitary trek into the brush. This isolation would prove to be a terrifying factor in the minutes that followed. As the light faded at 7 p.m., Rollin heard a rustling in the brush, and fueled by the adrenaline of the hunt, decided to pursue what he believed was a massive moose. He moved north, crouching and testing each step, but the eerie silence of the woods began to weigh on him. Suddenly, the brush just 40 feet ahead began to part like a green stage curtain, revealing two of the largest, fastest brown bears Rollin had ever seen, charging directly at him. In a flash of reflex, Rollin fired his rifle from the waist, but the bullet missed and struck a tree. Realizing he could not chamber another round in time, he turned his back, dropped his rifle, and covered his face. The two 400-pound bears struck him with the force of a team of linebackers, knocking him into the moss and sticks. The bears tag-teamed him, with one gnawing on his head while the other shredded his back and buttocks. Rollin forced himself to go limp and play dead, even as he felt the bears yanking his neck and clapping their jaws around his skull. The damage was horrific. The bear's teeth punctured more than 3 inches into his flesh, and his scalp was ripped open from ear to ear, sliding forward over his eyes like a slipped wig. Then the bears backed off a few yards. They laid down to rest as they panted from the effort, all while watching Rollin closely. Rollin tried to lay still as he fought shooting pain throughout his body. During the attack, the bears may have struck a nerve, and now Rollin's left leg twitched involuntarily. The watchful eyes of the bears didn't miss this motion. They pounced on the man once again, with one grinding its teeth on his skull as it bit, and the other chewing on his shoulder. Once again, the bears tired of tattering Rollin's flesh and lay down in nearby brush to watch him. This time he fought to maintain consciousness and remained still. Taking shallow breaths, he did his best to look dead and non-threatening, but for some reason, one of the grizzlies returned to Rollin's side. He could feel the bear's hot breath on his neck as it looked him over for signs of life. Rollin's acting efforts were not enough to convince the grizzly. It clamped its jaws onto his neck and lifted him off the ground. In a motion intended to break his neck, the bear tossed its head from side to side, violently and powerfully. Rollin remained still and limp, and this seemed to be enough to convince the bear he was dead. It dropped him unceremoniously back into the mud and disappeared into the brush. When the bears finally vanished into the silence, Rollin managed to stand and find Darrel, who was horrified by his friend's appearance. Rollin was rushed to the cabin, then transported via trailer and pickup truck to a plane that took him to Providence Hospital in Anchorage. Dr. Jim Scully spent 5 hours applying 200 stitches and picking pine needles off of Rollin's skull. Rollin spent 8 days in the hospital, but he recovered in record time without permanent disfigurement. The bears, described as 2 400-pound brown bears, were not killed and were likely surprised by Rollin's presence. There was no animal carcass cached nearby or evidence of cubs in the immediate vicinity. Speaking of cubs, our Cub Tier membership on Patreon, linked below, will give you ad-free early access to our episodes, photos, and notes. And the $3 per month goes a long way in helping me continue to produce educational and entertaining content like this. Understanding the scale of the bear population in Alaska provides a sobering perspective on Rollin's encounter. The state of Alaska is home to an estimated 30,000 brown bears, living across a total land area of approximately 663,300 square miles. When you calculate the density of these predators, there's approximately 1 bear for every 2,200 square miles in the state. Furthermore, Alaska records between 5 and 10 bear attacks annually, with fatal encounters occurring with tragic regularity, cementing its reputation as the most active region for bear-human conflict in North America. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I'm left with a few questions for you. First, do you think the outcome would have been different if Rollin had been accompanied by his hunting partner at the exact moment of the charge, or if the 2 men had simply resulted in 2 victims for the pair of bears? Second, one has to ask if bear spray, which creates a broader area of defense than a bolt-action rifle, would have been more effective in deterring 2 simultaneous chargers at such a close range of 40 feet. Finally, we must consider the psychological toll of playing dead. Does the act of remaining still actually encourage a bear to stop, or does it merely allow the animal to continue a non-predatory mauling without resistance? I'll gladly read and reply to your thoughts, so post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it. The young men stepped off the trail and were immediately immersed in the dense vegetation that grew over it. They knew this was not a maintained hiking trail, and would likely get little to no human traffic, and that's exactly why the 2 chose to take it. They had hiked a few hundred yards uphill and paused to catch their breath. The steep climb was rigorous, but it offered an increasingly rewarding view as it wound back through the riparian zone and crossed a small creek. Just as they resumed, there was a series of pops and cracks in the bushes, about 30 yards below them, that drew their attention. They paused and looked toward the noise, just as all hell broke loose. From only a few yards away, they saw a grizzly bear's head poke through the brush. As soon as the bear saw what they were, it sent brush popping and canes whipping as it stormed toward them. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Glacier National Park is one of the United States' premier wilderness areas located in northwestern Montana. Its rugged granite peaks and alpine lakes are hemmed by emerald patterns of Douglas fir, spruce, and pine forests, with quaking aspen and cottonwood stands interspersed in favorable habitat. The park hosts a broad panel of animals, including white-tailed deer, moose, and elk, with bighorn sheep and mountain goats staking their claim on the peaks. Glacier also hosts a broad selection of some of the most dangerous predators in the world, including bobcats, coyotes, cougars, wolves, black bears, and giant, ill-tempered grizzly bears. On July 8th of 1986, two young men from North Carolina were enjoying a free-spirited adventure, hiking the trails of Glacier, observing the scenery, and enjoying the wildlife. The trail they chose for their adventure on this particular day was the Sia Trail. It offers amazing views of going to the Sun Peak and the lush green valley below in the Sunrift Gorge. The elder of the two men was a 28-year-old who we'll call Jerry Sanders. His hiking buddy was a few years younger, and we'll call him Samuel Hauser. Now, the mountains of North Carolina are beautiful and wild, but they're nothing like the switchback trails that climb through the peaks of Glacier. The young men spent days wearing out their boots on the rugged gravel and rocks before choosing the Sia Trail. In the mid-1980s, Glacier was still adjusting to a growing number of visitors moving deeper into backcountry terrain. Education efforts existed, but widespread bear spray use was not yet common, as it was new to the market. It isn't clear if either man packed a firearm, or really expected to see a bear, let alone run into one. Trail signage warned of bear presence, but encounters were still often framed as rare anomalies, rather than part of a broader pattern. That afternoon, the hikers made their way up the Sia Trail before finding a promising wildlife trail that diverted from the maintained and marked trail. It was a small decision, an ordinary one, and one that countless visitors made every season. Just a few steps into the brush, the landscape changed, and the risk ratcheted up several notches. After ducking and stooping their way through the overgrown foliage, the trail began to take its toll on the men. They paused a moment as they chatted about the beauty. Just as they started to hike once again, brush began popping in the dense bushes just below the trail they were on. Suddenly, a huge grizzly bear's head appeared in the brush and glanced in their direction. It busted through the bushes and tore a rapid and destructive path toward the hikers, sending leaves and branches flying and freezing the men in their tracks. There was no time to shout, no time to back away. No warning growl that could be interpreted and processed. The encounter spun into chaos with the grizzly closing in on the men in a matter of seconds. The bear reached Jerry first, clamping its jaws on his thigh, driving its teeth into his flesh. The crushing power of the bear's jaws punched through skin and muscle, sending searing pain through his body. Tossing its head, the bear ripped an enormous chunk of flesh loose and knocked Jerry to his back. Samuel looked on, frozen in fear, as the bear dashed back into the brush after glaring in his direction momentarily. It fled the attack scene before imparting any damage on him, fortunately for him and Jerry. Jerry sank into shock almost immediately. Blood loss, adrenaline, and confusion combined as the men tried to understand what had just happened. They were deep in a remote section of the park, far from roads or immediate help. Somehow, Samuel managed to stabilize Jerry well enough to begin the long process of evacuation. Rescue teams arrived and administered first aid. Jerry was transported across the international border to a hospital in Cardston, Alberta. Despite the severity of his thigh injuries, he survived and was reported to be in satisfactory condition soon thereafter. As for the bear's motivation behind the ambush, the predatory attack is ruled out due to the fact that it didn't stalk the men or try to defend Jerry as a food source. It acted defensively after discovering the men had ventured into close range and fled the scene immediately. The bear was never identified beyond the species. Its sex was unknown. There was no indication of cubs or a carcass cached nearby. Speaking of cubs, our Cub Tier membership on Patreon, linked below, will grant you ad-free early access to episodes, pictures, and notes. And the $3 per month goes a long way in helping me continue to produce educational and entertaining content like this. Jerry and Samuel's attacks seemed like an anomaly at the time, but it was the initial instance of a concerning series of bear attacks in the park. In the years that followed, Glacier National Park would record dozens of bear encounters strikingly similar in nature. Hikers rounding blind corners, people stepping off the trail, bears surprised at close range in thick vegetation, attacks lasting seconds, not minutes. Victims survived because the bear's intent was not predatory, but defensive. The first incident on the Sia Trail set the tone for what would become a recurring theme. When humans and grizzlies collided unexpectedly in tight terrain, the bear almost always reacted first. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I'm left with a few questions for you. Are the grizzlies of Glacier and other national parks and wild areas feeling pressure from people venturing into backcountry regions? With outdoor enthusiasts continually venturing into remote corners of wilderness and bear populations higher than ever, will attacks inevitably increase? Would the use of bear spray or a firearm have prevented this attack, or was it too sudden for them to make a difference? I will gladly read and reply to your thoughts, so post them in the comments section below and let's talk about it. The young ranger was working in the station cabin's kitchen, cleaning up after dinner. As he wiped his hands, he heard the usual sounds of another ranger arriving at the cabin and walking up the stairs and across the wooden porch. Rangers often popped in to chat and pass on information to each other, so the noise on the porch didn't concern him. After a few seconds of consideration, the young ranger thought it might be his friend, Bill Reed, another ranger in the district. He casually walked across the living room and opened the cabin door. Glancing around, he could see the rear end of a grizzly bear poking out of the refrigerator the rangers kept on the porch. The young ranger quickly closed the door, but not before the grizzly caught sight of him from the corner of his eye. The bear spun so quickly that its impact shook the door and the wall just after the latch closed. As he looked on in horror, the door shook so violently from the bear's repeated swats that the young ranger expected it to collapse any second. The relentless attack on the cabin door forced the ranger to consider his options. The grizzly would be through the door and upon him at any moment. He glanced toward the back of the cabin and a window that may be his only hope of escape. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. On the western edge of Denali National Park in central Alaska, Wonder Lake sits peacefully, surrounded by tundra, low-growing shrubs, and expansive wilderness. The mountains that frame the lake form a scenic setting, with beautiful views in every direction. The views seem to reach forever as miles of sedge flats, willow thickets, and scattered spruce stands build a patchwork of magnificent sights and scenes. Summers here are cold and mild, with moderate precipitation and almost 24 hours of light. Winters, by contrast, are extremely cold, with heavy snow and nearly 24 hours of darkness. Spring and fall are almost non-existent this far north. This starkness in temperature, availability of food, and rigor creates a frenetic time frame in which wildlife have to eke out their existence, and massive grizzly bears are no exception. In 1973, on August 19th, 21-year-old John Osborne had just begun his career as a National Park Ranger and had been assigned to the Wonder Lake Ranger Station on the beautiful shores of Wonder Lake. His job description included hiking park trails and ensuring visitors followed laws and guidelines, like proper food storage and trash disposal. Recent changes in national parks in the lower 48 were just taking root after tragic events involving bears there But here, those changes had yet to be fully implemented or taken seriously. The daily routine for rangers was to investigate anything that drew their attention, but they had daily household chores as well. They lived in government-provided houses in the form of wilderness cabins, which required cleaning, organizing, and maintenance, all provided by the rangers. The evening of the 19th had worked out like so many others, a nice but brief dinner by himself, and Osborne began cleaning up afterward. Just after finishing washing the dishes and putting them in the drying rack, he heard a familiar sound coming from the front of the cabin. It sounded like boots thumping up the few stairs of the porch, and several steps across toward the threshold. Osborne wasn't expecting anyone in particular, but his friend Bill Reed came to mind. Reed visited every once in a while, and was probably stopping by to catch up once again. Osborne stepped across the living room and approached the door, expecting to see Reed once he opened it, but what he saw was much more dangerous. As Osborne glanced around the porch, the rear end of an enormous grizzly bear came into view. The bear was busily searching through the refrigerator, demonstrating that it was very familiar with how to open and navigate it. Momentarily frozen, Osborne immediately came to his senses and began pulling the door closed. The bear had somehow detected Osborne's presence before he could pull the door completely closed, and the bear's reactions were blindingly fast. It spun toward Osborne and made the few feet separating them in a single bound, just as the latch on the front door clicked shut, and not an instant too soon. As the bear slammed into the door, the entire front wall of the cabin shook. Even before the initial impact stopped shaking, a series of blows bowed the door inward as Osborne feared it might bust apart any second. Knowing the grizzly had the power to break through the door at any moment, Osborne knew he had to find a way to safety. Running toward the rear of the cabin, he hoped he could make it to the egress window in the bedroom before the bear broke in. Terror welled up so deeply in Osborne that he didn't try to open the window, but kicked his way through it and leapt through the shattered glass. Pushing his way through the glass window pane, Osborne was severely wounded himself, but escaped the cabin. As Osborne fled into the forest, the grizzly broke down the door and rampaged through it. Making his way to a neighboring ranger station, Osborne found help and received medical treatment. He explained the details of his encounter. A group of rangers grabbed firearms and headed to the cabin at Wonder Lake the following morning. After arriving at the cabin, the rangers were met with a broken-down door and a ransacked cabin. The bear had tattered the contents of the cabin and eaten anything it could fit in its mouth, and was remotely edible. A brief search ended with nothing to show for their efforts, as the grizzly had headed out and wasn't looking back. In retrospection, the rangers and their supervisors decided that food should no longer be stored on the porch in a refrigerator. The connection was made between the availability of an attractant and the presence of a grizzly bear seeking said attractant. The incident helped shape not only Parks Alaska policy, but also changes enacted across the broader national park system. Rangers and the park system in general began accepting responsibility for their role in altercations with grizzlies, and took immediate action to mitigate the causes. The grizzly bear's behavior in this incident is most consistent with food-conditioned curiosity rather than predatory intent. The animal was actively interacting with a refrigerator, indicating it had likely learned to associate human structures with food rewards. When Osborne opened the door, the bear reacted immediately, likely out of a feeling of threat. There was no animal carcass cached nearby. The bear was not acting in defense of its cubs. Speaking of cubs, our Cub Tier membership on Patreon, linked below, will give you ad-free early access to episodes, photos, and notes. And the $3 per month goes a long way in helping me continue to produce educational and entertaining content like this. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I'm left with a few questions for you. How often do bears become habituated to human food sources before a serious injury or fatal encounter finally forces management action? If Osborne had hesitated for only a few seconds longer at the door, would this incident have ended with his injury or death rather than a narrow escape? Would this bear have continued escalating its behavior if food attractants around the ranger station had not been addressed? I will gladly read and reply to your thoughts, so post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it. Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider clicking on the like button and clicking on the bell icon. We'll help you know when we post our new episodes. Posting our video links to your social media profiles furthers awareness, and it's fun. We slashed our prices in our merch store, linked below, so check out the bargains there while you shop. As a member of our human community, remember to adventure bravely and be careful out there, especially in bear country.